Oh, yes, I
There
see
we
us.
are.
Yeah,
All right, there
we're
must be a
here.
delay. All right,
Yeah.
fabulous. Hello, hello. All right, so I'll keep an eye on the comments over here if
Okay.
any come in. And
Yeah, I
all
can
right,
see him on my
and is it broadcasting to your page as well? We'll make sure
yes.
it's
Oh,
doing
let's
that.
see.
I'll take care.
It says, let's see, just let me go into mine. Just
And
no.
okay,
Oh, well, no.
let's make
No.
sure it's broadcasting. All right,
I just love technology, you know.
you
So
have to.
that's a
Seriously.
that's like a source of inflammation, I think.
The stress and the
Yes.
technology, I
Yes.
am going to make sure that friend's profile, here we go. So I got it taken care of. Well,
Perfect.
and it's interesting you say that. When we were talking the other day, uh, that's how the conversation came up, really, as to inflammation. You were looking at it from the landscape of high performance health and longevity, right? Because that's your
Yeah.
sweet spot. And I was looking at it from the landscape of toxicity and total body burden and how it's presenting in a variety of other symptoms. So we thought it was just a great opportunity for us to kind of, flesh out and answer some of the most pressing questions that people have and
Yes.
just kind of talk about it from, I think one of the things that you said that resonated most with me is that people are grasping for straws, right? And I always say the same thing. People will lock onto, oh, I heard this is great
Mhm.
for me. And then they'll go down that rabbit hole.
Right.
And before they know it, they have all kinds of other symptoms. And everything is not a one size fits all. And that's the beauty of both of our practices. We really work with people from an individual perspective to really help them get to the root cause of why they have the symptoms that they have and make the modifications. And it all starts with foundations. So,
Right.
all right, I will let
Yeah.
you go ahead and jump in
Well,
here.
no, it's fine. But no, I mean, inflammation is such a great place to start because I think it's such a buzzword
Yeah,
and people just kind of throw it out left and right without even really knowing, it's
hmm,
like, oh, I have inflammation. It's like, okay, well, what does that mean?
right. Is it
Uh,
puffiness? Is it water retention? Like,
right.
what is inflammation? And it's relative to everybody, right?
It
So,
is.
what do
It
you see most?
is. And I think that, really the root of everything is the start of it is inflammation. And, helping people to understand that we need some inflammation
Mhm.
because, you can't survive without cortisol in your, bloodstream and everything else that's helping you have that energy. But when you have too much inflammation and when you sit in that inflammation and it becomes chronic,
Mhm.
that's when the problems start. And I do talk a lot about longevity because I'm getting elderly.
You still
It's
look
so funny.
fabulous.
We Googled our age group, and my husband and I, and I'll be 62 next week, and he just turned 62 in January. And it's called us elderly. I was just like, I don't feel elderly.
I
Anyway,
won't.
but that's another
We
rabbit
just
hole for
lost
another
half our
day.
audience.
I know.
Like, wait, what?
Sorry about
But
that.
it's
But
true.
anyway.
I mean, I'm watching, people that I've known my whole life or people that I've gone to school with, and I'm like, whoa, wait a second, and I have to do the math on my fingers. I'm like, oh my gosh, I am like, 53 and
Yeah.
holy cow. But I'm seeing like so many concerns out there, right? Different things that people are dealing with. And again, we want to make sure that, everything we say is just candid conversation
Right.
between you and I. It's not intended to treat, cure, or
Mhm.
diagnose, right? And we don't want people to grasp hold of like one thing we say and just run with it. We're going to give you a variety of, different symptoms you might be experiencing or what we commonly see in our own families
Right.
and in our
Yeah.
practice, right? we talked a little bit about sources, root causes, symptoms. So let's unpack some of this for
Yeah.
people, because it started for me the other day when Luke overheard me having a
Mhm.
conversation with somebody, and I was asking them about brain fog specifically. And he said, "Hey, Mom, what were you talking about when you were talking about brain fog the other day? Because I wake up every morning, and he's had, if I knew 20 years ago what I know today as far as different things, with regards to kids, and where his eczema and his allergies and the
Right.
asthma and all of that
Mhm.
stemmed from, I would have made different choices
Yeah.
then, right? But now we're dealing with the ramification of, all of the symptoms that have evolved over the years
Mhm.
of like all of the medications and all of the things that he's continuously exposed himself
Right.
to. And, but he said to me, like, brain fog was a big one. They don't know. Most people don't know. And you said a word the other day, and it said, you know, people feel shame, or
Mhm.
people feel like a little bit of apprehension to say something because they don't feel knowledgeable enough about a particular topic, or they don't feel
Yeah.
confident enough asking. Um, and so let's talk a little bit more about symptoms people are
Yeah.
experiencing, and some of more of that conversation you and I started the other day about that.
Yeah, and when we start talking about longevity, and I'm doing a series on longevity, and it's become very evident that people don't understand that their longevity starts in their 20s. And it's
Mhm.
just like, to your son's point,
Yep.
when we have kids that are on medications for, let's say, ADHD, or
Mhm.
asthma or acne, or any
Yep.
of those things, you know kids are resilient, and their cells heal very, very quickly. So when you start to give them these medications, they're not going to see those effects right now.
Right.
And but yet when they start to be in their 20s or 30s, then they're going to go, oh well, gosh, I wake up with brain fog every morning,
Right.
you
Right.
know.
Right.
And or rheumatoid arthritis, people,
Mhm.
they start getting those aches in their joints. um you
But a
know
lot of people think that they have a genetic predisposition, and that's why they have what they have, right? It's
yeah.
in my genes. And the one of the biggest challenges that I have is helping people to gain awareness of the fact that they do not have to, be their genetics, right?
Mhm.
Only really 10% of it is unavoidable. So
Yeah.
that means that 90% of what you believe to be genetic
Mhm.
can actually be, uh, you know, reversed
Yeah, and you don't
in many
ever
capacities.
really have to fall into those symptoms.
Mhm.
We are all genetically predisposed to something. We
Right,
all have cancer cells in us.
right.
We all, and so it really, the saying is kind of being overused now, but genetics load the gun and our
Mhm.
lifestyle pulls the trigger.
Yeah.
And when I say lifestyle, I don't mean that you like partied your way through college, you experimented with different drugs, all this stuff. I mean, taking ibuprofen on a regular
Mhm.
basis, having the occasional alcohol, taking antibiotics, taking steroids, those kind of things over time is what I'm talking about in
Mhm.
lifestyle. I'm, obviously partying your way through college and stuff is going to have some kind of effect later in life.
There goes the rest of our audience.
I know.
Check.
Sorry.
But that, again, let's talk about, look, so the symptoms we're experiencing right now. And I think most people can self identify. And I know I can, like low mood,
Mhm.
low energy, imbalanced hormones, right? What are some others? Jump in here with me. Low libido.
Yeah, I mean, poor digestion. All of a sudden you can't eat the things that you used to be able to
Mhm.
eat. Gosh, what else? Poor
Skin.
sleep, skin
Hmm.
rashes.
Yeah. Headaches. Headaches is a big one.
Migraines is a
Mhm.
big one too. A lot of people suffer with migraines. I think it's becoming more environmental
Mhm.
versus anything else. But yeah, so, you talked about toxicity,
Yeah,
and that's another rabbit hole to dive down
right.
because our toxic load definitely impacts our inflammation.
Mhm.
The more toxic we are, the more inflamed we're going to be. So, um,
And
you
people
know,
don't realize what they're exposed to on a daily basis. And here's what I want to preface, and I know, Sue, you're going to back me on this, is it feels so overwhelming because there's so much coming at me. Like, where do I start? Right.
right.
So when I started to learn about just one thing, right? For example, like things that I use in my household,
Mhm,
the common things that
mhm,
I'm exposed to on a day-to-day basis that I can control, right? Like bleach, for example. Like you won't find a bottle of bleach in my household
mhm.
anymore, right?
Yeah.
There's alternatives. Aluminum foil. I was like, the minute I found out that when I was cooking with aluminum
Mhm.
foil, we would throw it on the grill all the time. You
Right.
don't think about that.
Or
I'm like,
wrap your food up in it and put it on the
right,
grill.
right. I'm like, gone,
Right.
done.
Right.
So it's for me, it's still is
Mhm.
evolving. And as we learn more about the different things that we can be doing from longevity, like red light therapy,
Right.
I got my loom box, a couple months
Mhm.
ago, and it's like, where do you start? And
Yeah.
most people are like, what do I do? Just do one thing.
And
If you
I
just
feel
heard me
like
say aluminum, just stop cooking with
I
aluminum.
feel like overwhelm stops people. And that's
Yeah,
where people in our position, I think we're at fault for saying, oh, you got to change all these things.
yeah.
And it's really one thing at a time. It seriously is. And that's, exactly what I have come to determine. It's like, if you have hormone imbalance, if you're starting to show signs of perimenopause, ditch the fluoride toothpaste.
Mhm.
It's like that's probably one of the number one things that you can do for yourself if you are entering into perimenopause and having those symptoms. Ditch the fluoride,
Yeah,
because that's so hormone disruption. And that's just one thing.
right.
That's so simple.
Laundry soap. I
Yep.
mean, if you literally walk down the aisles in the grocery stores where they have like detergents and shampoos and soaps, and I
Um,
I can't even, and I won't even go near that part of the store. I get a headache. But those are some of the things that you can control on a day-to-day basis.
mhm,
There's some things, that it may have caused inflammation. Let's talk. So we talked about some of the symptoms people might be experiencing, right? And people are like, okay, well, what do I do about it, right? So these are things you can control, but what are some of the other things that are more like root cause based? So when you and I start our investigative work, when we're working with somebody,
mhm,
right, we can look at inflammation from two landscapes. We can look at it from, like you said, environmental,
mhm.
but we can also look at it from a dietary landscape, and omega-6 to omega-3. So let's talk about
Yeah.
both of those, because I think it's important for people to understand that
Mhm.
inflammation isn't just necessarily tied to one thing, but there's other root
Yeah.
cause reasons for inflammation in the body to exist.
Yeah. Well, and when we're talking about simplicity and not overwhelming people with things to do for inflammation, like the omega-3, omega-6, people might be
Mhm.
going, well, you're speaking Greek to me. But
Mhm.
what that means is cook your own food, stay out of the fast food line,
Mhm.
watch your seed oils. It's like it's those basic things that the omega 6s are bad, but you need some, and the
Mhm.
omega 3s are good, but the omega 6s is what all the fast food restaurants use. They
Yeah.
use all those unhealthy oils. So staying out of the processed foods is definitely the number one thing to do to lower your inflammation in your gut, for sure.
Well, processed foods. So let's talk about foods. Let's talk about that category,
Mhm.
because like you said, we have omega-6s and omega-3s. And when we test for that, we're specifically looking at that ratio, but the AA to EPA
Mhm.
ratio, because now we're
Yeah.
talking about the really bad omega-6s
Right.
versus, which are the inflammatory
Mhm.
omega-6s, right? Versus the good omega-3s
Right.
and the really beneficial omega-3s. And a lot of times people are just like, it was funny, I was having a conversation just yesterday with a family member, and he's like, yeah, but I eat an avocado a day. And I'm like, okay, well, but the avocado isn't necessarily going to be the variable because that's an omega-6, right?
Mhm.
It's not the variable that's really going to help to balance that
Right.
ratio.
Right.
And the the diet today, the Western diet that we have, and the processed foods, I mean, the lunch meats alone, so if
It's
we
awful.
run down like the different omega-6s that are really impacting people, fried foods, like you
Hmm.
said, the
Yeah.
processed foods. That would be the number one thing that I would eliminate from my diet would be fried foods. And it's not to say, and I work with clients all the time that are like, well, I don't want to give up having my cocktails on the weekend, or,
Mhm.
and I'm like, you know what? This is not an all or nothing equation. This is how do we move your ratio so
Yeah.
that we can reduce the inflammation? Because
Right.
studies have shown that by, bringing this ratio into balance, it reduces, based on studies, the risk of a cardiovascular event by
Hmm.
somewhere between 70 to 90%.
Right.
I don't know
Right.
about you, but like I'm all in when I hear
Right. I
percentages like
know.
that.
Well, and
Like,
I think that most people are the same way, but you don't know what you don't know.
yeah,
And that's why we're doing this,
yeah,
is because just a little bit of education
yeah.
goes a long way. And you can reduce your all cause mortality percentage by a lot
Mhm.
by simply paying attention to your omegas and
Yeah.
the ratios. I mean, it's the percentage is amazing.
And the
Uh,
tests that we run are very different in functional
mhm.
medicine from traditional
Yeah.
tests. They're not looking at your omega-6 to 3 ratio. They're not
No.
looking at the AA to EPA ratio. If we can get that ratio. So, it's a simple, I actually have one on my shelf right there, just a Lancet blood spot test.
Mhm.
And we can, through diet modifications and supplements, really, help to encourage a client to bring those
Yeah.
ratios into balance. I would not give anybody any advice that I'm not using
Yeah.
from my own family members, right? But it's all individual to the person.
And to
So,
that point, how many of us started on this journey because we wanted a natural way for ourselves
mhm,
or a family member? You
yeah.
know, it's like anything that I have any client do, I do myself. And
Well, my whole thing, especially with Luke, being an asthmatic and with the amount of allergies he has, and one of the things I become really passionate about is kids and allergies and medication
mhm.
and the gut dysbiosis that's going on. But some practical things that people can be doing from a food standpoint. Let's just talk about the food inflammation
Yes.
for a second. So let's talk about like some of the top tips that you would give to a client that you're working with when it comes to food. So we
Mhm.
know what we can do with really good supplementation from
Yeah.
an omega-3 standpoint. But let's name off some of the tops. One thing that comes to mind for me would be really brightly colored
Yeah.
foods, right?
Eat the rainbow.
So eat the rainbow, like your reds, your oranges,
Mhm.
your blues, your greens, your purples. Those colored foods have the highest anti-inflammatory
Right.
properties.
And the reds typically are more centered to heart health, which is what you want
Mhm,
to keep your omega ratio so that you have a healthy heart. Fiber.
mhm.
Fiber is another big one that people just don't
Yeah,
realize that with our processed foods, you're getting no fiber.
yeah.
It's
I'm watching for the
zero.
questions. So if you have questions and you want us to answer them, just hop in here and let us know. Okay, so
Yeah.
we have the rainbow,
Uh-huh.
we have fiber.
Fiber.
What about, you know, here's the big one. I love this one. Like tomatoes. Tomatoes,
Mhm.
I'm Italian. So, like any other Italians in the room, like I love my
Mhm.
tomatoes. And I was so confused. I'm like, but they're anti-inflammatory.
Mhm.
But then you hear like, but they're nightshades. and I'm like, okay, but only about 10% of the population actually
Right.
has a challenge with
Hmm.
nightshades.
Yeah.
So unless you're one of those people, tomatoes are really good anti-inflammatory
Yeah.
fruits.
They are. They're amazing, and they are a fruit. They are not a vegetable. Same with the cucumber.
uh, and then you have your do you have your nuts and seeds?
Yep. And and it is knowing the seed oils, really.
Mm-hmm.
The cooking oils, because that's one of the biggest downfalls of the standard American diet is those bad seed oils. And I know you have a list and I have a list, and we're happy to share the list. So
Well, we both do. Heather said she's eating a fresh tomato right now.
Oh, yay. I love tomatoes. I
I
don't
do too.
understand people who don't like tomatoes. My daughter doesn't like tomatoes. I'm like, whatever.
How do you not? How do you not? I know I'm ready to
Yeah.
go into the garden. We're going to do a big batch. My husband loves the homemade salsa. So we're
Oh,
going to
who
we got the
doesn't?
jalapenos and the tomatoes
Yeah.
and everything. So I'm going to make
Yeah.
a big
Yeah.
batch of salsa, and then we're just going to can it and make sure that that's stashed away.
And you probably
Okay.
make really good spaghetti sauce too. So,
Oh, I know. And that's the age old adage, like, is it sauce or is it gravy? So
oh my gosh.
we could go down a rabbit hole
I
there.
know. There's another one.
So let's
But
talk.
and also knowing what
Yeah.
your food sensitivities are. I mean, that's
Yeah.
another thing that I think doesn't get enough attention
Yeah.
is when you have a food sensitivity and how that affects your
Yeah.
inflammation, because then you're starting with that oxidized stress, that
Hmm.
internal inflammation, because you're sensitive to a food.
Yeah.
And I don't think people give that enough. You hear about allergies and people
Right.
know that they have an allergy, so they stay away from it. But the
Right.
sensitivities are something that we test.
Yeah.
I don't know, we test like 190 or something like that.
Yeah.
It's
You know
everything.
what though? I just noticed today we do have, if anybody's interested, we do have
Mm-hmm.
a limited food test
Yes.
that I know is actually just came up on promo today. So if you're interested,
Yeah.
it tests your 5 biggest sensitivities like gluten and
Mhm.
eggs,
Dairy,
dairy,
dairy.
chicken,
Yeah.
and almonds. So
Yeah.
those are, and the food sensitivity doesn't mean allergy. About 90% of the population actually has food
Sensitivities. Yeah.
sensitivities. And we would remove those certain foods for either 6 weeks, 12 weeks, or 6 months, depending on the severity of your sensitivity,
Mhm.
and then go to work on your gut, and help to seal
Yeah.
and heal that gut wall back up. Because that's a lot, and that'll jump into the other side of inflammation. We'll just touch on that for a few minutes because there's chronic root cause
Mhm.
inflammation, right? So we have a very simple test that we can do from a dietary standpoint that we can look at that'll show the omega-6 to omega-3s, where you're at. So if you want this point in time and what we can do to make those modifications, you can make those modifications in about 12 to 16 weeks
Yeah.
and really drastically impact the dietary inflammation that's going on in the body, right?
And I say this all the time on my podcast that our bodies are miraculous. They're amazing.
Mhm.
I have clients that have chronic issues, and when we start to flood you with nutrition
Yeah.
and the good stuff, these issues just really start to fade
Mhm.
away because all of a sudden your body's being given what it needs. And so, you know, I do get a lot of pushback on the 12 to 16 weeks, but in the whole big scheme of things, you
Yeah.
know, that's 3 months out of your
Yeah.
life.
Well, relative to, I had one
And,
client
and it's
who's
not like you're on this restrictive thing for that long,
right.
it's when I wanted to mention one thing about the food sensitivities too before I forget this. But the reason why usually you become sensitive to a food is because you're not having a variety of foods in your diet.
Mhm.
How many people eat chicken and broccoli every
Yeah.
day?
Yeah. Well, I know
And
I have a lot of athletes that do just that.
yeah.
They're either prepping or and that has me thinking about like even over exercising and the stress and
Mhm.
inflammation that causes on the
Yeah.
body.
Yeah.
But food diversity is
It's
huge.
so important. I mean, you can eat chicken, but just put other things in there with it, you
Mhm.
know?
Or change from chicken breast to
Change.
chicken
Right.
thighs and stuff
Yeah.
like that. Food cycling is
Mhm.
huge.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
try to eat from different menus every couple weeks so
Mhm.
that I'm not, so that there is an enormous amount of diversity in my diet. And that's one of the things that I work with
Well,
clients
and
on.
when you talk about heartburn,
Hmm.
acid reflux, you
Yeah.
talk about the gut bacteria and things that we need. If
Yeah.
you're eating the same thing, your body's not like you don't have that diverse bacteria in your gut
Hmm.
either. So that's when we start running into those gut issues
Hmm.
because you don't have enough diverse bacteria,
Yeah.
and it just leads to so many things. I mean, this could be a 3 hour live.
I know, I know. All right, so we'll give them a little bit more here
Yeah.
because you just touched on some of those other root causes of what's causing inflammation in the body, right? So all those
Yeah.
symptoms, the headaches, the low mood, the low libido, the food sensitivities, the poor digestion, the water retention, the puffiness. Like even the number one thing is when somebody comes to me and I'm running through a toxicity quiz with them, right? And I'm asking about their eyes and they're like foggy or itchy or whatever. Like eyes are a big indicator of
Mhm.
like underlying inflammation in the
Yeah.
body, sluggishness. So if you're like, okay, you just like named me to a T, we can look at the ratio, the dietary ratio of omega-6s to omega-3s, or we also explore, like you're saying, the gut stuff or other root causes that
Right.
could have led to this inflammation. People think inflammation is the root cause, but it's actually it's deeper than that. There's something
Mhm.
else causing the
The inflammation.
inflammation,
That's right.
right? So
What came
there,
first?
right, what came first, right? So there's something causing the inflammation. So let's explore then, from a food standpoint, purchase the Clean 15,
Yeah.
especially if you can organically. Stay away from the dirty dozen. And I know you and I both have lists like, what
Yeah.
is that? People are like, so when
We
you're
have the
shopping,
list.
we have the list that we'd be more than happy to get you. We talked about that, but like things that you may have been exposed to, like if you ever had mono, like I know 14 years ago, I was diagnosed with an autoimmune Epstein-Barr, and I was like, I was in the hospital for 3 days. They had me on heart monitors. They thought it was heart related. And I was like, what is going on? It took them 6 months to figure out that it was Epstein-Barr. I'm like, well, what do I do about this? I'm thinking at this point, 14 years ago, I'm like, well, what do I take? And they're like, I had a great neurologist. He's like,
Yeah.
it's diet and exercise, Dawn. I'm like, what?
And
So
that's
that
so rare. That is so
it was
rare.
like, but he was
Yeah.
he was from India, so he's
Yeah.
well versed
Mhm.
in
Yeah.
functional medicine and Ayurvedic
Mhm.
modalities, and that was the first time I learned that how powerful diet and exercise
Mhm.
was going to play in my life
Yeah.
over the next many years. Mold, so
Mhm.
like talk about
Mold is
that.
a big one. Mold is huge. And, if you live near water, you got mold.
Yeah.
So that's a big one.
I
That's
learned the other day, and I have to do this little test. I was going to take a video, but anywhere that you may have had mold exposure, you know, those mycotoxins still existing, right,
Mhm.
and in the body or parasites. And people are like, I don't have parasites. It's not a third world country. Like, I'm sorry, guys.
Everybody's got
Everybody's
parasites.
got parasites. And the funny thing is, I'm looking at the time, and the date is September 18th, and September 20th is a full moon. So if over the past
Oh.
couple of days you've noticed these weird heightened symptoms, right? Like bowel
Mhm.
movements are weird, or you all of a sudden you're like, I've got headaches or brain fog or something's going,
Cravings.
cravings,
Yeah.
gut related stuff,
Yeah.
especially over the past couple of days, that parasites, and I know you
Mhm.
and I both do different groups with parasite protocols, but
Mhm.
full moon is the heightened time where
Yeah.
parasites come out to play. So if you've
It's
noticed,
so gross.
I know, but if you've noticed
I
like
know.
heightened
People are like going, oh my God.
symptoms right about now, we need
Yeah.
to have a conversation.
Yeah.
But mold,
Mm.
if you have like one of those dispensers on the fridge, like if you take a
Mhm.
Q-tip and just take your Q-tip and like, swab up the the water
Yeah.
like dispenser
Yeah.
in the fridge, there's no way to clean those. Did you ever,
No.
if you've had the same fridge for 15, 20 years and you're still
Mhm.
getting water out of there, my friends, there's
Yeah.
no way to clean the tubing
No.
in that.
And what about the water bottles, that you just keep drinking water out of? So you may
Mhm.
not wash it
Right,
as, like you
right,
wash your other things every day.
right.
And that's another source. And it's not in the
Yeah,
straw, it's in like where you put the straw. It's in
yep,
that little doohickey thing.
yep.
So yeah, it's
So,
everywhere.
and going back to gut, that's
Yeah.
birth control, that's antibiotics,
Mhm.
that is all of the things, I always say, here is, here's your gut, and these, gaps between your fingers are tight junctions, and all of the use over the years of like antibiotics and steroids, and my hands like that way,
Yeah.
and it opens these tight junctions, and now things are spilling past the gut wall
Hmm.
and into the bloodstream and creating that heightened histamine response. The goal is, to seal and heal that gut wall up. So many people go rogue, and I've seen this in my practice a lot lately, is because they're smart people,
Hmm.
and they're doing their homework, and they're reading, and they're learning, and they're really attempting to resolve a lot of things on their
Yeah.
own. And the challenge is they're just kind of piecemealing things together, right? Or they're doing certain parts of protocols and not
Hmm.
finishing a protocol, or they're not doing something for the longevity that is really
Yeah.
going to support their well-being long term. And so I never want somebody to feel like what they're doing isn't good enough.
Mhm.
I just really want to help them get past
Right.
what they're
Well, and
experiencing.
it's a process.
Yeah.
It's like you have to trust the process. And you can't remove everything all at once.
Hmm.
Your body can't handle that. And a lot of people do more of a pharmaceutical removal
Yeah.
versus doing something that's natural and something that your body can actually do something with. And the pharmaceuticals are just going to put you in another problem. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so it's a process and it does
Yeah.
take time. And that's, sometimes that is the biggest challenge over everything is the time because everyone
Yeah.
wants that, quick microwave mentality. So,
Yeah. Yeah. It
but,
doesn't matter whether it's weight loss or
but
health
the,
or symptoms, but most
no, and
most
the
people.
bottom.
Oh, I was
Go
just
ahead.
going to say, most people have been dealing with these symptoms though for
Mhm.
years. I have one client who's been dealing with gut related stuff for 15 years,
I
and
know.
she's in a
But you
different
get
place
used to it. That's
6
the
months
problem.
later.
Is your
Yes.
body starts to sit in this place and then when you start to think you want to do something about it, your brain and your mind is going to talk you out of it because
Yeah.
you're comfy.
Yep.
And I mean the bottom line really is, we're talking about inflammation and that is we kind of picked the topic because lowering inflammation is going to be your best bet
Hmm.
no
Yeah.
matter all of the different things that are out there. When you start to lower that inflammation, I have another friend who's also an IHB like us, and I said, I don't necessarily see overweight people or fat people. It's like I see inflamed people.
Yeah.
There's a difference. I mean,
Yep.
yes, there's the people that are really, really obese, but there's a difference when you know what inflammation looks
Hmm.
like. And it's like, out of the blue, you're packing on the weight and stuff. That's inflammation. You
Hmm.
have to eat how many extra calories a day? Like 3,000 extra calories a day in order to gain 1 pound of fat. So
Hmm.
when you start to notice that maybe your clothes are a little bit tighter,
Hmm.
I would almost put money on it that it's inflammation.
Yeah. Well, and to go back to what we were talking about before with regards to stress too.
Hmm.
So the stress leads to the imbalance in the hormone pathway, right? Because now
Hmm.
the body's overproducing cortisol.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be whether you're over exercising. There's something called a J curve, and I see athletes do this all the time. They're over exercising and they're not fueling properly
Mhm.
and they're not resting enough.
Yeah.
If you're exercising, I really encourage you 2 days, off a
Yeah.
week, Uh,
Your body needs
your
it.
body needs it. The
Mhm.
best time to stop a workout too is when all of a sudden you feel really good. I went to the
Right.
gym yesterday and I was just like, I need to start going in the morning because I was always a mid-afternoon, person. But all
Mhm.
of a sudden I'm like, yeah, I don't really know if I'm a mid-afternoon workout person anymore. So I'm at the gym yesterday and I was like, after I did about, 3, 4 sets, I was like starting to feel good. I'm like, okay, I got it in me. Right when you start to reach that
Mhm.
is when you should actually stop.
Yeah.
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 You do a little bit more and then stop, because when you overexert leads to stress. And again, most people
Mhm.
aren't adequately fueling or
Right.
resting. And the body is going to become inflamed because of the increase in
Yeah.
stress, right? So you're going
Yeah.
to
And
see in guys lower testosterone, all
if
kinds of
you
other impact from it.
if you have a stressful life, like home, work, the whole thing,
Yeah.
don't go kill yourself in the gym,
Yeah.
because you're just adding stress upon stress. You
Yeah.
may think you're working it out, but really what you need to do is maybe go take a sauna, maybe do a
Yeah.
little bit of light restorative
Mhm.
yoga, some
Yeah.
meditation. Don't go do a hit class. you know.
No, that's the last thing you want to do.
I
But it
know.
is
So
so hard because we've been conditioned as
mhm,
women to exercise more, eat less, and it's
mhm,
wreaking havoc on the body. And I get so
yeah.
many that are like, why can't I lose this midsection weight? I'm like, well, do you really want to know?
Yeah, I know. Do you really want the answer?
Do you really want the answer? Do you really want me to be honest with
Yeah.
you? I know you and I could go on and on. So
Yes.
we will not be here next week. The week after,
Yes.
our commitment is to make sure that we do these real talks with you on a much more frequent basis, because there's
Mhm.
so many questions that come in and we want to be able to help and support you. Sue, I know you also have a private community too. I do as well. So if you want a
Mhm.
little bit more exposure to Sue or myself, please feel free to reach out to us personally. If there's
Yeah.
anything that we can answer that maybe sparked a little curiosity today, let us know how we can support you.
Yeah. And if there's a topic, let us
Yeah,
know, because we'll just talk.
absolutely. Yeah. Well, and I would love to know what people want to learn more about.
Yeah, I know.
What's
Me too.
important to you.
Yeah.
So drop the topics
Yeah.
below, and we'll see you in a couple weeks. Thank you, everyone, for joining us
Thanks,
today. And Sue, thank
everyone.
you so much.
Oh, thank you. This is fun.
You're welcome, Joanne. Bye, everyone.